Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
100
Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagle. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records. I've also written 2 books as well, which you can find out about. Swing of the Blade is the second book, and the first book is For the Sake of Heaviness, the History of Metal Blade Records. And a lot of the stories we're going to talk about today are in that first book and some in the second book as well. Anyway, we're talking about Metallica today, the original song that they ever wrote and ever recorded and ever put out, which of course was also the beginning of Metal Blade Records as well, because that was on the first Metal Massacre album. The next time you're in Las Vegas, or if you currently live in Las Vegas or the Las Vegas area, you need to visit the Metal Blade Museum. Now, not only are there artifacts from Metal Blade artists like Metallica, Slayer, Cannibal Corpse, Gwar, Lizzie Borden, there's also artifacts from bands that we had something to do with as well, like Guns N' Roses, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Deep Purple, Thin Lizzy, Alice Cooper, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really great metal museum. It's located right near the Strip in Las Vegas. Also, our retail store is also now in the museum. So you can go pick up your Metal Blade vinyl, CDs, collectibles, shirts, all sorts of cool stuff. And since we're talking about Metallica this episode, some of the things we're going to talk about today, like the original demo, the receipt for the Metal Massacre mastering, and the flyer where Metallica and Slayer played together in Anaheim, all of those are located in the Metal Blade Museum in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Just go to metalblade.com/museum for all the details. So we're going to talk to Bill Metoyer, who was around at that time and can hopefully explain some things about engineering for us. And then we're going to talk to John Kornarens, who was the guy who met Lars Ulrich in the parking lot of the Michael Schenker show at the country club in Reseda in December of 1980 and ran into a kid wearing a Saxon European t-shirt whose name was Lars. And he became friends with him and immediately talked to, because I knew John as well. And, we all became friends, and we'll talk at length about that and how this song came together and the whole thing. So it should be a fun one. But as always, we begin up north in Canada with Mr. Martin Popoff. Martin, what say you?
Yes, indeed, Brian. Excellent choice. It's definitely important we talk about Hit the Lights from Metallica. Talk about something that fits on 100 songs that define heavy metal. I mean, I would almost say that this is the second most important song in the history of heavy metal to define heavy metal after Black Sabbath. And let me explain. So this is on Kill 'Em All, issued July 25th, 1983, but it occurs first on Metal Massacre, Brian's first sampler, 1982. The version that we get on the very first one has Lloyd Grant on the leads, and then they've got a second version that has Dave Mustaine. And of course, Dave and Lloyd are not in the official Metallica, but they're there in the early days. So yeah, on the second and third pressings, we've got Hit the Lights on there again, but with Dave Mustaine doing the solo. Obviously, a landmark situation there with Metal Blade being the first instance of Metallica showing up on vinyl. So yeah, what do we have here with this song? It's also the first song on Kill 'Em All. listening to this album, it was obvious to us that it was something new and different. In the same way that Phil Anselmo says, the key to Pantera is it was the money riff all the time. That's what it felt like hearing this album, that it was just riff after riff after riff. Also, really good production, so trying to sound really good and succeeding in sounding really good, which is something that was over and above what was happening in the new wave of British heavy metal. And the tightness, the palm muted, the famous James right hand, the level and speed that they could get to, that machine gun chugging, as we say, was new. And yeah, just the speed and the angry vocals. That was an important thing here as well. I mean, it kind of reminds me of hearing the Sex Pistols for the first time and how heavy that record was, but how there was this extra layer of menace that came out of Johnny Rotten. You kind of get that here as well. So this, obviously, we knew it was an American band. This is like 6,000, 5,000 miles away from the new wave of British heavy metal. We've got the entire Atlantic Ocean and the entire continental United States to get to Metallica. But it did not feel like it was part of the new wave of British heavy metal at all. I have this argument with people all the time. I hear practically no new wave of British heavy metal in Metallica. I don't care that Lars loved Diamond Head and they love Savage and all this stuff and all the new wave of British heavy metal bands. But I really feel like this is the invention of a new kind of music. And I've done an entire podcast episode on this as well, calling Kill 'Em All the first metal album. So we have the first heavy metal album with Black Sabbath in 1970. We got all sorts of heavy metal albums in the ensuing dozen years. But I call this the first metal album. If you shorten the term to refer a little bit more to the modern version of the term, I think this is the very first one. I've got a good buddy, John Gaffney, who argues that Stained Class is the first metal album. But I think it's this record. I think the short-lived speed metal era is kind of over with this record, and we do get the first thrash record. So when I say first metal album, I also mean first thrash album. I also mean first post-speed metal album. This is a super important song in that it is the song that invents thrash, because it's not only inventing it as the first song on the first thrash album, but it's also inventing it as a super important song on Brian's first Metal Massacre sampler. So yeah, just a couple more things about it. So again, I hear, diamond lights, shoot out the lights. You hear that title, that word lights in here, and you think of things like that. I think it's an amazing, amazing title. I think it's just a cool, bright, but still violent sort of title. You got hit and you got lights in it, right? I don't think it's the most modern sounding song on this record. I think most of the other songs sound newer, and I suppose they probably are more or less newer, right? But this song, it's the same song that we get on Metal Massacre. I find it to be just a little bit frantic and a little bit closer to speed metal than some of the other ones, and less authoritatively thrash. But right off the bat, they're showing all sorts of talented moves. Again, it's beautifully produced. It's really tightly played. It's got that halftime part in it as well. It's got some really nice expert stop starts in it. So yeah, super important song in the history of metal. And like I say, 100 songs that define heavy metal, I'd say this is the second most important song of them all.
Wow, quite the dissertation there by Mr. Martin Popoff. He's written 150 books on hard rock and heavy metal, so he really is one of the leading experts on metal in the world, which is why we have him as part of this podcast. Although some interesting takes he has on there, which I may not completely agree with, but that's what all these things are for, right? Everybody has their own opinion. I wouldn't put this... It's interesting that he doesn't think that this sounds like the new wave of British heavy metal, and really the whole first record he's talking about in Kill 'Em All, where I agree with him. It's definitely different. It's heavier. It's faster. I think that, both Metallica and Slayer, and really Anthrax as well, had a lot of influence from punk music, and yet Megadeth as well. And I think that's why those four bands were kind of the bands of that scene, because you would take the old school metal and you put a little punk flavor in it, and that's kind of what you got. And that's really the basis of Metallica. So I do kind of agree that it's a different style, but clearly very important. He makes it number 2. It's hard to say. I mean, we're not ranking these because I don't like to really rank stuff that much. We will have top 20, but we probably won't rank those in order, although there is, in my opinion, a definitive number 1, which you will find out in the months to come. But thanks to Martin, as always. Welcoming back a true legend. He produced or engineered Slayer, Armored Saint, Trouble, Flotsam and Jetsam, Fate's Warning, and like 10 million others. Bill Metoyer, how are you, sir?
And all because of Mr. Brian Slagle. I'm okay, Brian. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. So we're talking about Metallica, first ever Metallica song that ended up being on the first Metal Massacre. When was the first time that you discovered Metallica?
The first time I discovered Metallica was because of this guy named Brian Slagle. I mean, he put out this compilation record, and it had this band Metallica, who I had never heard of before, on the record.
Did you get to see them when they played around LA? I can't remember.
No, I don't think I really didn't, because back then, even though I was part of the metal scene, I was too busy hanging out with my friends, playing street hockey, terrorizing our neighborhoods all the time. So, no, I think Metallica was one of the ones that I missed in the very early days. I mean, even though some of the bands that I worked on with you would play with them, no, I never really got to see them in the early days of LA.
Yeah, I thought, because I know, well, in addition to terrorizing everybody playing hockey, which I can attest to, I know obviously working in the studio usually at night precludes that as well. I need some technical help here from you. We can save people going to Google to figure these things out. So the first ever recording of Hit the Lights, which ended up on the original Metal Massacre, was recorded on a Fostex tape recorder. Can you explain to people what a Fostex tape recorder is or was?
No, to be honest with you. But I mean, tape, just about everything that we used back then was tape, okay? But there was a 24-track machine. You could put 24 different tracks on there. A 16-track tape machine, 8-track machine, 4-track, and there was a machine that just recorded stereo. I'm not sure which one of those they used.
I believe it was the 4-track Fostex
4-track
tape. But of course, it was recorded on a cassette, which we will talk about with Mr. John Kornarens shortly, because that's quite the story as well. But yeah, it was a cassette tape. I believe it was a 4-track Fostex.
Wow, that is amazing. And well, the thing that I'm curious about is, obviously you were one of the first people to ever hear this song. And I'm just wondering, what is it about the song that grabbed you? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not just because Lars was your friend or anything. I mean, there had to be something.
Yeah, well, and we'll get into the story a lot more with John coming up. But I didn't hear that song until I got the actual album.
Really?
He brought it so late, and they had to bump it up from. They didn't have anything to play it on. They had to bump it up from from the cassette to a 1/4-inch tape to be able to master it. So I didn't even hear it until I got the record. So I didn't know if it was good, bad, horrible. I had no idea what to expect. And it was quite surprising, actually, because I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know what it was. I didn't, I knew Lars obviously, but that was it. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be. But it was like, I mean, look, all those tracks on that record were pretty primitive going back in time. But it actually was not too bad. Now, would I have guessed then that they were becoming one of the biggest, if not the biggest, heavy metal band of all time? No, not on that initial tape. But yeah, but I mean, it was what it was. I was just happy that we had enough songs to make a record at that point.
You didn't have to kick anybody off to put them on at the last minute like that?
No, in fact, when Lars asked me about that, I just told him yes. I didn't really care what it was, because I just needed another track. And if you notice on that original Metal Massacre, there's 2 Malice songs, because we needed an extra song, because I couldn't find enough bands. And Motley Crue, who was supposed to be on it originally, they dropped off, obviously, because the record had come out at that point. And, I got them with Green World, our distributor, and they started to take off. So it wasn't really a need for them to be on there. And I didn't really wasn't able to get another band on there until, later, when Steeler fell off. And then,
but the song actually surprised you, huh? You didn't know,
Well, I had no idea I had no idea what it was going to be. It could have been a complete train wreck for all I knew. But I was like, oh wow, okay, it's not too bad. It was and I knew it was a Fostex recording, so I didn't expect that it was going to be spectacular. But it wasn't bad. It was like it's a decent song. I was like, oh, okay, that's not too bad at all. Again, I wouldn't have predicted that they would become so massively huge, but it worked, and it started their career, which is kind of crazy.
I don't think it's like the best Metallica song ever, but it was their first song. So how can you not have Metallica's first ever song on a list of 100?
Yeah, I mean, it launched their career. And of course, there's several versions of it. There's obviously this original one, which was just Lars, James, who played all the guitars and the bass, and then their friend Lloyd Grant, who played the lead on the very original version. Then when we reissued Metal Massacre, by then the actual demo had surfaced, and we used that version of it, which kind of to me is, of the three, let's say, because there's the demo and then obviously the Kill 'Em All version. I kind of like the No Life Till Leather version the best of all three of those, just in terms of the sound and also just the performance itself.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. But the other thing that is pretty amazing about just that song is that it's the only song that every member of Metallica has played. Did you know that part?
No.
I mean, yeah. I mean, McGovney played live.
Yeah.
McGovney played on it live. Lloyd Grant, Mustaine, everybody that has been in Metallica has played that song.
That makes sense. I mean,
so
they don't have a long list of band members, obviously, but
no.
But aside from the bass players, I guess. But
true.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it makes sense because obviously, like you said, McGovney was in the band at first, and then obviously Cliff played it, and Mustaine was in it early as well. So yeah, that makes sense. A little bit of obscure Metallica trivia by Bill Metoyer here. Thank you.
There you go. Had to find something to talk about.
When you first heard the demo, which obviously was the second version that ended up on the second version of Metal Massacre, what were your thoughts on that? Because I was pretty blown away by how good it was.
Yeah, it was definitely different. I mean, it's obviously a band that was influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal, that's for sure. And it was one of the first songs that I heard from a local band that was playing music like that here in LA, to be honest with you. So yeah, I was surprised. Made you want to hear more from them, that's for sure.
Did they ever talk to you about doing anything with them? Because I know they were running around trying to get something done, because they obviously asked me, and I didn't have any money, so there's no way I could pay for anything. So I know they talked to somebody. I forget what the guy's name was, but he's like, yeah, we can make a record for $10,000. I'm like, I don't have $1,000, let alone $10,000.
Well, it sure as hell wasn't me, especially in my wet dreams.
I mean, nobody. Did they ever talk to you about doing something, recording with them?
No, they never have, Brian. I'm kind of hurt from that, but no, unfortunately.
Well, see, if you would have gone to see them, maybe it would have been a whole other story.
Instead of knocking down mailboxes with baseball bats, like I was probably doing at the time. So yeah, I missed out on that one. That would have been awesome to work with those guys. Yeah,
it was an interesting time back then. I can't remember when talking to them early on, if your name came up or not, because you were really the guy in LA in the early 80s. I mean, obviously you did, pretty much all the Metal Blade stuff, and, any metal band back then that was heavy was like, well, let's just go get Bill Metoyer to do it.
Well, yeah, but that was after Metal Massacre 1, really. It had to be. So,
but, Armored Saint obviously did the EP with you, and they were, they were probably the closest band to Metallica back before they moved to San Francisco. Exactly.
They were all friends, and I'm still blown away how I didn't see Metallica live when they were always around the Armored Saint guys. So,
yeah, and they played a couple shows together. Well, you see, being a juvenile delinquent did not help you out there.
No, it did not help me working with Metallica, that's for sure. But
what's going on? I'm Arch Manning, Viore athlete and college quarterback. Whether I'm running, training, traveling, or just unwinding at home, I love doing it in my core shorts from Viore. With a breathable boxer brief liner, they're quick to dry, super versatile, and stand up to even my most intense training sessions. Plus, they come in 3 inseams and a ton of colors. Ready to try a pair? go to viore.com/arch and get 20% off at checkout. I think you're going to love them as much as I do. That's VUORI.com/ARCH and get 20% off your first order. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions. Not only will you receive 20% off your first purchase, but enjoy free shipping on any U.S. orders over $75 and free returns. Have a great day.
Yeah.
All right, so it's always fun to have you on. Appreciate all of the knowledge and words and a little bit of trivia there too. So thanks as always.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Okay, we welcome in our next guest, longtime stage manager at Entertainment Tonight. You know him from actually the first ever heavy metal fanzine in the United States, the New Heavy Metal Review. He's heavily involved in that. Associate producer on the original Metal Massacre record. He's also amazing performance in the Metal Massacre documentary, which you can see on Thunderflix at the moment. Also, he's the guy that ran into Lars Ulrich in December 1980 at a Michael Schenker show, and the rest is kind of history from there. Mr. John Kornarens, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I was thinking the other day, so did we first meet at a country club swap meet? I forget which one it was.
We met at the one across from the Capitol Records next to the
Capitol Records. I couldn't remember if it was Capitol or the one in Reseda.
Yeah, I found your number in this little fanzine at Moby Disc, and yeah, I met you I think in November of '80 because you had a really good tape collection.
Yes,
I had to get some live Scorpion stuff, so I had to go down and meet you.
I remember that part of it. Yeah, and then obviously we got into the new wave of British heavy metal, and like I mentioned, you met Lars, and then a few days later, all three of us were hanging out. We kind of became the three musketeers of the new wave of British heavy metal in LA at the time.
Yep.
It's still weird thinking back to like when all that stuff happened and, just three kids and who knew how insane Lars's career was going to go. I can't remember if you were there, but I was at his townhouse where his parents lived in his room, and he had a drum set that wasn't even put together, just pieces of the drums sitting on the floor. And I'm like, what is that for? He's like, I'm going to start a band. Like, yeah, sure you are, Lars.
He had the front room, looked over the tennis courts. His parents had the back room. And there was a middle room that was empty. And so I was over there one day in his room, and he goes, hey, I want to show you something. And we go to the middle bedroom, and he goes to open the door, and it goes clunk, and it hits something. I go, that room's empty. What's in there? And I squeezed in, and there's this drum kit. And I go, what's this for? And he goes, I'm going to learn how to play drums and start a band. Same thing he told you. And I said, really? And he gets behind the drums, and he starts playing. And I said, dude, stop, man. That's a common wall. You're going to get your family kicked out of here. What are you doing? and it just kept going. It was so loud. I said, whatever. And I left the room and I closed the door, went back in and looked at some of his Danish pornos or whatever and his records, and he was in there just flailing away. And I just couldn't believe this guy. What a nut, drum kit in the townhouse.
Yeah, well, he was always interesting because he was a couple years younger than we were. And I remember we'd all, go travel all over the place to record stores to hopefully find something in there from the new wave of British heavy metal, something cool. But he was always out of the car before he could even get the keys out of the ignition, because he knew there was, if there's anything in there, there might only be one thing, and three people aren't going to get the one thing. So he was a maniac.
Well, he kind of destroyed your face one day. You came to my parents' house in Studio City. We went down to Newport Beach, and we were driving around Long Beach, and I think we went to Zed's and then Music Mart.
Yep.
I was in my Scirocco, and I was driving. You're in the passenger seat, and he's sitting behind you, and I'm literally rolling in a parking spot, and he's clicking the seat forward, shoving you into the windshield. Your glasses are coming off, and he's got the door open, and he's running out. And that little bastard's in there getting the only copy of whatever's in there that we all want.
Yeah,
And you're just looking at me, shaking your head, going, oh, my God, this guy's out of control. So,
yeah, but I mean, look, it served him well, because if he wants something, he usually is able to get it. He gets it,
yeah.
And, that was, in 1981 when he went to England in the summer, which both of us were very upset about because we couldn't go, but he had the means to go. And
right.
that, I think, really kickstarted everything because, he hung out with the Diamond Head guys and Motorhead. And that's, I think, when he came back trying to put together a band, which, wasn't very successful for a while.
It was more successful because it was on a record. And if you're on a record back in the day, that's how you start getting gigs.
Even before that, though, I remember because he had jammed with James a couple of times, and James was like,
right before he went to Europe. Yes, yeah.
He's like, yeah, this kid really isn't very good, and yada yada. And then
I'm not feeling it, is what he said.
Yeah, and then when Lars came back, and I think he talked to you first and said, hey, there's this album you guys are doing. Can I be on it?
What he did, you twisted my arm to start writing for the fanzine, and I'm glad you did, because I didn't like writing, but once I started, it was fun.
Yeah.
And a few months later, you come to me and you go, hey, let's do a record like Metal for Mothers. And so that's how Metal Massacre starts. So Lars comes back, I think in the fall of September, maybe early October, and I get a phone call, and he called and he says, hey, I hear you're doing a record with Brian. I said, yeah. He goes, I want to be on it. I said, you don't have a band. He goes, well, I'm going to start putting something together with James. I said, can I have a slot? I said, okay, it's okay with me, but you call Brian and make sure it's okay with him. And he called you, and you gave him the thumbs up, and then you called me and said, oh, he's just, just deal with him. He's annoying me. I got too many other people to deal with. and so it kind of just, fell in my lap, what little I did, but it was going down to Norwalk a couple times and watching them work up this song and stuff. So, and that's why the first version has an explosion, because I did say to Lars, we've given you the last position on the record, so have some kind of an explosion like the end of a Bach or Beethoven concerto, or the end of like a live Judas Priest concert, but have some big out. And so what they did is they took the amp and threw it on the ground. And so that's what that explosion is. Only on the first pressing. After that, it was gone. So yeah, keep your copy if you got one.
The funny thing about that, so honestly, one of the reasons why I said yes was, number one, he was my friend, and it was like, okay, sure. And number two is I needed bands. So it's like, if we can get an extra band in here, they're going to record something, sure. Not knowing anything about if it was going to be any good or not, we had no.
Exactly. We never heard it till the day of the
no
mastering.
clue.
Yeah.
So then we go to the infamous day of the mastering, and both of us had been telling Lars, like, okay, here's the final day. Like, if you don't have the track in by this day, it's not going to be on the record. And we had it got to the point where we were in the studio mastering this thing and still waiting for Lars to show up with this tape. And this is, of course, before cell phones and all of that nonsense. So we told him when to be there, but we literally had no idea if he was going to show up or not.
Well, I remember we were on the sidewalk waiting for him. He parked with the old Jack in the Boxes, and I think the session was 11 to 3 because you have the receipt over at the museum. So I think it was in the morning, but I don't remember. But I know it was like 15 minutes before the session was starting. And he comes running up panic, and you go to him. You just go, where is it? And he pulls out a cassette out of his back pocket. So, similar to something like this, a non-chrome tape.
Yep.
And you go, where's the $50? And he goes, I thought you're paying. And you guys started arguing about who's paying the $50 for the transfer from cassette to quarter inch.
Well, we didn't even get to that because he brought the tape in, and then we went in and gave it to the mastering engineer, and he said, yeah, we have to bump this up, and it's going to cost $50. And then we were kind of like, okay, nobody had $50. Thankfully, you did. Otherwise, who knows, it would have even made it on the record at that point.
He would have gone back home and told James, I don't have a slot. And James might have said, see ya. That's
Why I like to think we would have made it happen somehow, but it still was just another one of these famous, infamous stories about those early days. And and then, of course, the big nightmare. People, I've been asked this a million times. Of course, it's like, how did it get misspelled, and how did Ron McGovney's name get misspelled? Well, it's very simple. Lars gave me the credits the last day in his handwriting, and I can't remember if I redid it, but I think I just gave the typesetter. And kids, if you don't know what a typesetter is, look it up on Google. Gave it to the typesetter who was setting all the type and everything for the album. You didn't get to approve those things back then. You didn't get to see it before it's done. The first time I ever saw the whole record was when 2,500 of them were delivered to the record store I was working at. And I opened it up and looked at the cover like, oh, this is really cool. Then I look at the back and go, oh, no. They misspelled Metallica. And, well, McGovney's name, I think they misspelled Magoonie because I think they thought the V was a U in the handwriting. But I don't know how the Metallica got misspelled. The only thing I can think of is the typesetter. It's not really a word, so maybe she just thought it should have 2 T's in it. I don't really know.
A made-up word, yeah. It would sound better.
But I know McGovney's name was on there because he was, he didn't play on the tape, obviously, but he was in the band at that point. So
right, they needed a bass player, and he was providing a lot of other assets. So
yeah, he was an integral part. One I was on. It was funny. I was on Eddie Trunk's show recently, and we were talking about. I was telling a story about the first show Metallica ever, the second show Metallica ever played, but the first show they played opening for Saxon, talking about that. And I had just assumed that Lars, because, Lars was the one that usually made things happen. And, I figured Lars probably, somehow got the whiskey to put Metallica on, who nobody knew the hell they were at that point, opening for Saxon, which is, a huge European band from the new heavy metal we all loved. And McGovney was listening to the show and called in. He said, no, that's not what happened. What happened was I had the demo and I was going to the whiskey to try to get this gig. And I knew Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, and they were out front. And they said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm trying to get a gig for my band. And they were the ones that said, oh, we know the booking agent, brought him up. And the booking agent said, yeah, sure, whatever. And they got that.
And the irony is the tape he had was 2 cover versions of 2 new wave of British heavy metal bands, Killing Time and Let It Loose, which they played at that show as their own songs, right?
Well, that was the other great thing about that Saxon show was that they were playing in between bands. They're playing those songs. They're playing like 2 or 3 of those songs. And I remember Lars came running up to us going, oh my God, you got to tell the engineer to stop playing this song because we're playing these songs later. So I think you had to go up and convince the guy to stop playing the tape.
Well, because I'm the one who gave him the tape. That was my
it's your fault.
Yeah. It was my fault. Because we walked in and they were playing Boston and REO Speedwagon and just, or maybe there was a Van Halen or Black Sabbath track. And I knew the guy and I said, hey, I've got this tape and you might want to play this music because these people here kind of hear this newer stuff. And so the tape was going and Lars, was being as sharp as he is, was upstairs in the dressing room and he heard it. And he came running down and he's looking around. I think it had been like Angel Witch and Tigers. And then he came running up and he said, what's next? Is that your tape? Yeah. What's next? And I said, Savage, Let It Loose. He goes, fuck, take that out. We're playing that tonight. So, because they only had 2 original songs then. They had Hit the Lights, Jump in the Fire, and I think they debuted Metal Militia that night. But everything else was a cover version, a cover song. But they didn't say, hey, this is a song by them. And they just said, hey, this is Helpless or this is Let It Loose or whatever. So, the jig was almost up, but he was smart enough to realize, I better get down there and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that was hysterical.
Yeah.
Wait, what is that?
Yeah, that's just such another Larsism.
Yeah, the lore of the early Metallica days is pretty incredible. I mean, pretty incredible. I mean, just the odds. That show, so that it was a Michael Schenker show at the Country Club where you ran into him at the parking lot afterwards. Unbeknownst to a lot of people that were there, not knowing each other. I think all the guys from Motley were there, and I don't think they might have known each other. All the Armored Saint guys were there. All the Metallica guys were there, not knowing each other. So there's a whole bunch of the local, I think, pretty much everybody that became like a metal band in LA was pretty much at that show, which is kind of another random, interesting piece.
It was an amazing show. It brought people together that just recognized the brilliance of Michael Schenker over right there. And it was just incredible who was there at that show, and what a great place to see a band. And I was in the parking lot after the show, just hanging out with my sister and watching people, and I noticed some little guy with a white shirt about 30 yards away, and he kind of turns out, and I kind of look, he turns away, then he turns back out, and he had this S with a blade running through it, and I went, fuck. And I said, I got to go talk to that guy. He's got a Saxon shirt on, and I thought you and I were the only people that knew who Saxon were in LA, and there's some guy with a Saxon shirt on. I mean, and I went right up to him, and it's a little guy, and he looks up, and I go, you like Saxon? He goes, you know who Saxon are? And that's how it all started, is because of that T-shirt. And then I started talking about Angel. He goes, who else do you like? I said, Angel Witch, and he's like flipping out, and Bow Wow, and of course Iron Maiden, blah blah blah. I said, I've never met anybody with a Saxon shirt. There's only like one other person that I think that kind of knows about this stuff, and that's how it all started, just because of his shirt. And I saw him a couple of years ago backstage after a SoFi show, and we talked for a few minutes as he's making his rounds, and then I kind of said goodbye, and I just turned back at him. I said, if you had a Black Sabbath or Judas Priest shirt on, I never would have talked to you. And he goes, yeah, none of this might have ever happened like that. And it's just like, it's amazing when you think about it, because they're so big now and 43, 44 years later. And it's just amazing how life works. And these guys are going to be the biggest hard rock metal band ever in the history of that style of music overall.
I mean, certainly one of the biggest rock bands in history too. It's kind of crazy.
And rock bands too, yeah. I mean, not just metal, but rock. So yeah, it's incredible what they've accomplished.
Well, I think for him too, like we were like a godsend for him, because he came here from Denmark and didn't know anybody, just moved to the U.S. and it's not that easy for a kid that was I think he was 16 at the time or whatever.
Yeah, 16. Yeah.
And not thinking that anybody in LA is going to know anything about this scene, and then all of a sudden he meets us. And it's like, oh my God, there are two guys that are into the same thing. And I remember I had the Diamond Head, white cover and all that stuff that he's like, I can't believe you guys are into this. So it kind of worked out in an insane way. It's a funny story, kind of about that whole thing, where when Metallica was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it was in Cleveland, which at first I was like, ugh, Cleveland. I mean, no offense, Cleveland. It's a beautiful city, but there's not a lot to do there. But it kind of worked out really well, because since there was nothing to really do there, all of us that were there kind of all hung out together. It was really the first time I spent a lot of time with Charlie Benanti and kind of became really good friends with him, just talking music. And so Metallica had a party. I can't remember if it was before or after. It might have been after the induction thing at the House of Blues, which was kind of right. We were all staying right near there, and so towards the end of the evening, probably like 2 or 3 in the morning, and we've had a couple of adult beverages, and we're just kind of talking, and like what's some room in there, and Lars just looks at me and goes, "How the fuck did all this happen?" Right? It's just so amazing. I just everybody's got that same story, but it's interesting when you're involved in it to see things, and you're never in a random moment. I don't think none of us thought he was ever going to amount to being the drummer in one of the biggest bands of all time.
Never. He was just a record collecting buddy that was more obsessive than you and I. I mean, he was just annoying to a point where the guy at Moby Disc told me, "Don't bring in that annoying Dutch guy in here anymore. Keep him out of here." I said, "He's from Denmark. I don't care. Keep him out of here. He's annoying." Because he'd go to every record store and go in the back room and start opening up boxes.
He was over the top. Which was what he says he's going to do something, he usually does it. I want to talk about something a little bit different here. We talked about Uli John Roth with Steve Stevens, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, and I know you're a good friend of his. And I actually told Steve the story. So when you and I the first time we went to England was in 1982, and you had somehow struck up a friendship with Uli John Roth. And so we're over there, and you had talked to him, and next thing I know, we're on a train headed south to London to go to Uli John Roth's house. And I was like freaking out, because at that point, it's the first rock star I was ever going to meet, and he was so nice. Like, tell the whole backstory about how that happened.
I was just an obsessive fan of Uli and Michael Schenker back in the 70s, and just was obsessive, and that's why I was at the Michael Schenker group show. I think I got Uli's address from somebody, I don't remember who, and I just wrote him a letter, and I said, "Hey, I'm writing for this new heavy metal review magazine, and I'm going to be in Europe in the summer. Can I come and interview you?" And I got this letter back in this beautiful penmanship. "Yeah, sure, here's my address, or here's my phone number," and arrange it. And so when you and I got to London, one of the things we did in between going to see John Durham or Jeff Barton or Venom or whoever at Newcastle was to go interview Uli for the new heavy metal review, and that's how it all started. And then when we went down to Seaford, and he was living with Monica Danneman, and Hendrix pictures everywhere, and it was just like, wow, this is a rock star house. This is wild. Yeah,
and he was so unbelievably nice, just unbelievably nice. Yeah. And since then, you've gone on to do a lot of work with him. Maybe set up stuff for his live shows and done a bunch of different stuff with him.
He was just here. I just saw him 2 months ago. He was down at my brother's building having a Sky Academy. He'll be back in April. He's actually going to do a tour, and he'll start in LA. He's just kind of like the big brother that's always needs help, and he's like, he just needs friends and help him keep creating music and touring and stuff. So, and he's a good guy. It's just I'm very, very comfortable with him. So I just stayed in touch with him forever. he's a lot easier to be around than Michael Schenker. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've all met Michael, and
Yeah.
I mean, he's my favorite guitar player of all time. But
It's a little more complicated. I was with Uli when he was on that metal show, when Kurt Hammett said he'll do that metal show if you put Uli on, because Uli had something to promote. Yeah, that was, again, another guy, you and I met him together. So I've known him since 1982, June or July, when we were there.
That's crazy. Well, if he wants to do a podcast, let me know.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I actually probably would want to do one.
It'd be fun to do. So another funny story from back in the day. So when I was working at the record store, we'd always have people come in and hang out afterwards. Like I remember one time Jakey Lee came in and played me some demos for Ozzy that were incredible and ended up being Bark at the Moon. And it would just hang out afterwards after closing. And you came in one time and closed up and said, "Hey, have something to play you. But you have to guess what it is. I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what it is." So you start playing this, and I have no idea. I'm guessing, I'm thinking it's like some new wave British heavy metal band. And I was like, I couldn't figure it out after a couple of songs. I have no idea. He said, "That's the new Metallica demo." I'm like, what? Because it was light years away from what Hit the Lights was.
So it was basically not this tape, but I queued past Hit the Lights because I knew you would know that song. So I queued it up to the Mechanics.
Yeah.
And it was freaking amazing. As soon as I got it from Lars, I said, I get, make 10 copies and mail them out. Well, I made a copy for you, and I rolled out to Oz. And I guess you guys shut down at 8 or 9 at night. And I said, put this in. And yeah, it was like so much better than Hit the Lights from the Metal Massacre. I was like, how did they get so good so fast?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, that is just incredible. From even, seeing them, because at that point, I think I'd seen them live once or twice.
Right.
And, the new songs were good, and you can see they're starting to become band-ish, but I didn't expect that a demo that good. I'm like, holy cow, that was pretty incredible. And the fact that, I had no idea who it was. So like,
that's the best part, waiting for you to realize. It's too hard to guess because you would never guess compared to the first Hit the Lights.
Yeah, I just kept thinking, something in England or Europe or some new band over there. I could never. It sounded so much like that, which of course is why they ended up being really big. And
right,
it's such a bummer though that they never really got a fan base in LA. I mean, it worked out perfect in the end with them moving to San Francisco with Cliff and the whole thing. But because I don't know how many times you saw them, but I saw them, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, Troubadour and all those places. And it just never, they started to get pretty good as a band, obviously, but the response was just very lukewarm at best. I don't think I ever saw a show with them where the fans went super crazy.
I agree with you. I mean, down here was the Motley Crues and the Rats and the leftover bands from the late 70s. But yeah, the intensity wasn't, it was a small core of people that really liked the heavy stuff. And San Francisco really embraced them, and they liked more of the heavy stuff.
Well, yeah.
And I have to say they got heavier by the 7th show. That's when James started playing guitar. When they added the second guitar, that really kind of just amped up all the energy and stuff.
Well, I remember the Troubadour refused to book them because they thought they're a punk band. They were too heavy, so they couldn't play the Troubadour. But they played some of the Metal Massacre gigs that we put together at the Roxy with Bitch and Pandemonium. They were like the opening band. And it still didn't work. So that was the crazy thing about San Francisco when, at the last minute I called them up and said, "Hey, I've got this show in San Francisco, and I think Mr. Ungle dropped out. Can you guys do it?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So we went up there, and none of us had a clue what was going on up there. Like I think I'd been to maybe one show in San Francisco before that. I can't remember exactly, but we went up there, and the kids went freaking crazy for them. They all had the demo. So they knew the band, they knew the songs. There's probably about 200 kids there, and it was unlike. I mean, they just went insane. Even the band couldn't believe it. We're like, what is happening here? It's a whole different scene up there. A lot heavier, obviously, because then you had the whole thrash scene come from there, and a lot of those guys were at that original show too.
The Metal Church, Exodus, and it's just a different scene. I guess it's the environment. It's colder. It's grayer. It's just less sunny and no palm trees, right?
That is true. That is very true. Yeah, it made sense. But it was crazy. But I remember I'll never forget this one show. The show basically got banned from at the Troubadour was, they came out. I thought they were great, but there was, wasn't that many kids there, and I don't even know who else was on the bill. It might have just been them and a couple other local bands or something. And I thought they were great, but then I remember the booking agent afterwards says, that band can't play here anymore. They're too heavy. I'm like, they're too heavy?
They're too heavy.
and they were still, that was when they were still doing I think they had 3 or 4 originals, and they were still doing, Blitzkrieg and some of the other stuff.
Oh, that'd probably be the summer of '82. Yeah. I think they played Troubadour once or twice in the summer of '82. They had that famous BAM ad where they had the summer tour. There was 6 shows or whatever. So one of them was at a place in North Hollywood called HJ's, which I was at. That's now a Chinese restaurant.
Oh wow!
It's across from FM Station, if you remember that place. But
we actually did shows there towards the end, but FM Station for a while was kind of just a weird, lame sort of bar. But there's a flyer that is in the Metal Blade Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada, where Metallica was playing a show out in Anaheim, and they were a little bit better in Anaheim because the crowds out there were a little heavier, and Slayer was opening for them. And I was thinking for a minute, I don't really remember the show. I was talking to Kerry about that, and I go, I'm pretty sure I must have been there. And he said, yeah, you were there, but that's the only time that, of course, aside from the Big Four and whatever else, is the only time that they ever played together Metallica was in LA.
Well, would that be the Woodstock or Radio City? Probably, right?
I think it was Woodstock or Radio City, one of the two. It was Metallica and
Slayer opening for Metallica. Wow.
Yeah, because that Slayer came obviously a little bit after them, so
right,
and that might have been the second time I saw Slayer. The first time I saw Slayer, they opened for Bitch out in Orange County, and this might have been the second or third show I saw them. I forget.
Okay.
But I had completely forgotten about that show. You'd think Metallica Slayer show you would remember back in the day.
But a lot of times that stuff didn't even register. I mean, it was so fresh and new, but at the same time, you don't think you're talking about a show you saw 40 plus years ago, right? So it's kind of hard to remember. And you've probably been to thousands of shows. So,
oh yeah, that's part of it. I remember a lot of the ones in LA, like the ones we did at the Roxy and right, those sort of the Metal Massacre shows where Metallica played. And I never forget that Troubadour show. It's pretty funny.
Well, I remember the first Metallica show, which is Radio City, and you just got a rubber stamp. There's 35 people.
Yep.
And they came out and they hit the whole opening chord of Hit the Lights, and Mustaine breaks a string. So they just stop. He stops. And he had a backup guitar behind him, because I've talked to Ron McGovney about this. He had a 79 Gibson Les Paul Custom, which was Ron's guitar. It's his backup guitar, but he refuses to pick it up and get started. So he sits there, and people wait while he puts a new string on his guitar. And James is just pacing back and forth. Nobody's saying anything. It's like, oh my God. That was the start of Metallica. Broken string.
Well, James was very shy, so that was
of course,
not surprising. Completely. I think I've told the story 1,000 times, but I think the first 2 or 3 times I met him, he might have said 3 words.
Yeah, same with me. When Lars brought him to my parents' house in May of '81, it's like, that was my friend James. He didn't say anything hardly. He liked the poster, he liked the Flying V, and he liked Kiss. And Lars hated Kiss. Yeah. So we talked a little bit, and that was about it. And then stayed all night. Had my parents made dinner for him. He was eating my sister's chocolate chip cookies, and that's when he was sitting in the living room and he pulls out a 5th of Jack Daniels and starts downing it in my parents' living room. And it's like, put that away. My dad's going to kick my ass. What are you doing? I never seen anybody downing Jack Daniels, especially a 16-year-old.
Yeah, right.
I've never met before, and he's hanging out in my parents' living room. So very quiet, very, very alert, but no, he didn't say much, that's for sure.
Yeah, I missed that first Radio City gig. I don't remember why, but I didn't go.
I think you were working. I think we talked, because I was going to drive down there, and I think you had to work at Sears or wherever you were working at the time. So
yeah, probably. Yeah, that would make sense, because I wouldn't get off on time to go, but it
was a long
obviously
haul.
Went to the second one where they opened for Saxon, so which was quite insane. That still to this day I go, it's amazing that they were able to do that. And I'm glad McGovney called into Eddie Trunk and righted the story so we know exactly how they got.
That's great. So he's listening, and he's monitoring. That's good.
Yeah. He called in and he said that's not how it happened. We're like, oh, okay, cool. So
I think because he was a photographer, he had taken some photos for Motley Crue, so that's how he knew the Motley Crue guys. Yep. So, and he was up there and he had that demo, Killing Time, Let It Loose. And they're on a record called Metal Massacre. Yep. So I think that, and that's, that put them over the top. And all the early flyers always said now appearing on Metal Massacre.
Yep.
Before the High Velocity thing, which was later, but whatever that was. But it was Metal Massacre.
Yeah,
So,
well, that was, I mean, like we said over the years. I mean, at that point in time, it's that was not common for bands like that to be on a record. I mean,
nope.
That was the whole idea, was to like, well, let's do something like you said, like what they did with Metal from Others, these compilations in England, and try to help the scene in LA, because at that point nobody cared what was going on in the scene in LA.
Well, and the other thing is, if you're on a record, you must be better than the guys who are not on a record, right? So that's half of it. You're on a record, you must be good or better than the other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, and both of us helped out quite a bit, Motley Crue as well, which neither of us, I think, have ever gotten any credit for. I remember the one thing, was it you the one who met Sylvie Simmons, the writer for Sounds first? Yeah,
she lived across from me, and we did all that press for them.
Yeah. She was great, and she was the Sounds correspondent, which Sounds was the main music magazine in England at the time, and they were the ones that coined the phrase "New Wave of British Heavy Metal" and the whole thing. But we did, Sylvie, along with our help, did a big article on Motley Crue that came out, and sounds like a 3-page thing, and people in England went crazy for that.
And then we did a heavy metal roundup of LA bands, and I remember doing all that with Sylvie. And then we did a second version, and it appeared in Kerrang. And then by that point, her name was Laura Canyon, because she lived near Laurel Canyon.
Oh yeah.
So she had a different name for Kerrang than she did for Sounds. And because by then Sounds was kind of not focusing on metal. And so we did a whole roundup, and that was Metallica's first press in Europe, with the little blurb in between Bitch and Steeler and Cirith Ungol and Warlord and all the other bands. And there was this little Metallica band that was moving up to San Francisco.
Yeah, I remember when we went to England, like I mean, that was a great trip and it was a lot of fun. But the worst part of it was when we met Jeff Barton, and he was not the nicest guy on the planet. He hated the Metal Massacre record. I think they gave it like a no star or 1-star review or something, and Sounds, which is devastating, because that was the Bible at the time, and we're just both like, what, this is horrible.
And we got an interview with him, we got to sit down with him in the Sounds office, and here we are with our record, and he didn't like it.
He didn't like it. He was even like, I remember he was saying that he didn't even really like the new wave of British heavy metal. He was more into Kiss and the 70s stuff, but he just thought it was an interesting story. We're just, because like Jeff Barton is, if you don't know who he is, I mean, he was the one that coined the phrase "New Wave of British Heavy Metal," and he was the main writer at Sounds that was really pushing this whole scene. Maiden and Saxon and Diamond Head and Def Leppard, all of them. And then when we met him, and it was like, don't meet your heroes,
right? It was sad. Or then we went up to Neat Records, and then we were going out the back way, and we hear this noise, sound like the gutter was throwing up, and up comes, walking up the stairs, there's Venom, just the three guys from Venom. And I was like, are you guys for real? I remember asking Cronus if he believed in Satan, and he said, "Yeah, I do," or something. I was like, "It's so surreal." We're standing in front of Venom, the guys that invented black metal, and it's like, oh my gosh. Or Tigers of Pantang, or Raven and stuff. We saw them in Newcastle.
Yeah, we interviewed Raven. I remember I was trying to transcribe the tape, and they talked so fast with such an accent. I couldn't understand half of the things they said. It was impossible. On the Venom front too, by the way. Abaddon has written a book, and he was very nice and invited me to write the foreword, which I did. That book is out now. If you want to, I don't know if it ever came out in America, but you can buy it on Amazon as an import. So check that out from Venom. But yeah, pretty crazy. Well, dude, thanks so much for doing this, man. This is a lot of fun to go back in the early days there.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me do it with you. It was fun. It's nice.
Yeah, you're an important part of the early days of Metallica, so it's always fun talking about that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
There you have it. That was a fun one, going down memory lane about the origins and beginnings of Metallica and the song Hit the Lights. Thanks so much to John Kornarens, my old friend. Really great to talk to him. And another old friend of mine, Mr. Bill Metoyer. Always good to talk to him. And Martin Popoff as well. Lizzie Borden for our theme song. And producer Christian Blatt, who keeps this whole thing running. We'll see you guys next episode.
100